This video lecture is intended specifically for practitioners of craft, whether you identify as an intuitive, diviner, seer, psychic, medium, witch, magician, occultist, shaman, or other similar designation of one who engages actively with metaphysical energy and contacts beyond the veil. I want to focus on 5 main pillars of tarot uses by the practitioner of craft, the most basic being intuitive creativity, and then divination, using tarot to amplify psychic ability, then tarot for celestial contacts, and tarot for mediumship. We'll also talk briefly at the end on using tarot in magic or spellcrafting. Before we immerse ourselves into the core content of this lecture, I want to take a step back and give some theoretical context to what we will be talking about. As above, so below, as within, so without. We all know essentially what it implies because intuitively we know it to be true. This principle forms the cornerstone of almost all of the prevalent Western mystery traditions. Yet, a parallel concept runs through Eastern mystery traditions as well, the concept of twin esoteric studies, or outer alchemy and inner alchemy. Outer alchemy is a body of metaphysical law that governs the universe. Inner alchemy is the body of metaphysical law that governs the individual soul, spirit, and the forces innate to your body. The understanding is the law of outer alchemy is a mirror reflection of the law of inner alchemy and vice versa. The two are one and the same. In fact, not only are they the same, but the magician is one who applies that universal body of law to connect heaven, earth, and man, a Trinitarian principle that is expressed here using Chinese Taoist terminology, but it's found throughout many religions and esoteric traditions throughout the world. Man, or the individual practitioner, can command the powers of heaven and the powers of earth through one body of metaphysical law, and through man, the channel, produce into the physical world anything man can visualize with his mind's eye. As above, so below, as within, so without. It expresses the notion that the more self-aware you are of your own inner sanctum, the more wisdom and knowledge you gain about the universe at large. Likewise, when you study the metaphysics of the universe through any of the physical sciences or even the metaphysical sciences such as astrology, numerology, divination, theurgy, or alchemy, then you can gain a better understanding of your own inner workings, because the form and mechanics of the universe is the same as the form and mechanics of the self. While the metaphysical concept expressed by as above, so below dates back to the Renaissance, if not earlier, only in the last decade has science begun to catch up with what metaphysicians have intuited for centuries. On the left is a photograph taken by fluorescent microscopy of the human neuron. That's right, your brain cell. The black center looks empty, but it's opaque, where the nucleus wasn't able to show up on film. That center black point is the core. On the right is a photograph taken by NASA's Hubble telescope capturing a view of our galaxy. The view of our galaxy and the view of our brain cell looks strikingly similar. Although I'm not going to draw any further conclusions here, I would say that you can't dismiss the hypothesis that there is some universal tie or connection here, some universal law that governs both the outer alchemy of the universe and inner alchemy of the human mind. And scientists are not dismissing a possible connectivity. Since 2013, scientists have been working on a theory for connecting the laws of nature that govern brain circuits to the laws of nature that govern the internet or the organic growth of social networks online. Scientists are proposing that what governs the expansive external circuits of the internet mirror that which governs the internal circuits of the brain, or as above, so below. We can apply this principle to explaining the function and mechanics of tarot. The 78 cards of the tarot deck express 78 energetic pulse points in the metaphysical universe, which correspond with facets of the material plane, the world we live in. I think of it almost like 78 chakra points that run this world, which the 78 cards of tarot express, like 78 metaphysical acupressure points that altogether express the governance of physical nature. Now, one law that we know already that governs what you saw earlier of a brain cell and of a galaxy is this principle. Particles are kept in order by the gravity of an energetic core, a concept attributed to Isaac Newton, which later developed into the law of gravitation and the gravitational constant. Here, we're going to look at how this core concept applies to craft. My source for the theoretical principle that is the undercurrent of how I approach tarot as a tool for craft comes from the esoteric Chinese Taoist text, Huangdi Yinfu Jing, that is recognized in the context of the East Asian cultures, perhaps in the way grimoires like the Key of Solomon, Francis Barrett's The Magus, or Agrippa's The Fourth Book of Occult Philosophy are in Western occult traditions. It's often translated as the Yellow Emperor's Classics of the Hidden Talisman or Classics of the Esoteric Talisman. In the text, one line stands out to me. All manifestations in the universe can be generated by the practitioner's physical body. The function is determined by the will of the practitioner. The mechanics is determined by the practitioner's mind. In other words, a practitioner of craft can produce any manifestation in this universe at all, so long as he can rightly determine the function and mechanics. The function is by his will or intent. The mechanics is by the powers of his capable mind. Now, to better understand the function and mechanics of tarot, let's look to another older divinatory system for reference. Assuming the same energetic core or body of metaphysical law that compels the operative qualities of the I Ching, arguably the oldest form of divination in human history, can be used as reference to help us curate the operative qualities of the tarot, we're going to start our conversation about the tarot by talking about the I Ching. First, what is the I Ching? The I Ching is the sum of a binary system, ones and zeros, the yin and the yang, a dualistic passive and active principle that form a fixed set of fundamental building blocks or elements that our universe is comprised of. When you work through the various permutations of arrangements, you get a multiplicity of arrangements, or 64 hexagrams that have come to represent 64 archetypal narratives or qualities of nature. To help us practitioners better organize this multiplicity of energetic influences, we subdivide the 64 hexagrams into two sequences. Okay, so at this point, my explanation of the structure of the I Ching should sound very familiar to seasoned tarot readers. If a light bulb didn't go on in your head along with the thought, hey, that sounds a lot like tarot, then you haven't been paying attention. Now, to give you the background on where I trace my uses for tarot in craft, I'm looking to the historically documented uses of the I Ching in China. First, the I Ching Book of Changes is philosophy. Altogether, it's a statement about the human condition and how our universe, the physical manifestations from their metaphysical implications, can be expressed by 64 hexagrams, each hexagram in its own right a story. The most popular understanding of the I Ching today is its use in divination. Whether you're using yarrow stalks, rice grains, or coins, it can be used to gain insights and revelations into events that have not yet happened. An equally popular use of the I Ching, which is not as well advertised in the West, is akin to the Ouija board, where the 64 hexagrams form a common language that can connect the human world of priests and priestesses with the spirit world, the dead, and beyond. Finally, if you've ever studied Fu talismans or other forms of Taoist sorcery, you often find one of the hexagrams being used as an energetic sigil. Hexagrams are often used in spellcrafting. Now, side by side, let's run a comparative analysis between the I Ching and the tarot. Before we proceed, though, let's address how a prevailing opinion is that side-by-side comparisons of different mystery traditions, especially traditions from different cultures, should be discouraged, that mystery traditions ought to be studied within their own orthodox universes. I'm of the polar opposite opinion. comparative analysis should absolutely be encouraged, because for every few fumbles we might make comparing apples to oranges, we improve our chances of discovering universal trends. And it's those universal trends I'm most fascinated by, not some one set orthodox tradition. Nothing in this world exists in isolation of everything else. So to understand another tradition is simply to better understand the context of your own tradition. And what have scholars been doing since the earliest of academic days? Comparative analysis. So here, we see that both the I Ching and the Tarot are formed from a binary of energies. In Tarot, every card is at its core essence an active energy or a passive energy. For example, in the English Tarot systems, the suit of Wands and Swords, fire and air, are active, whereas the suit of Cups and Pentacles, water and earth, are passive. In the I Ching, the binary can combine to form fundamental elements, which are the metaphysical building blocks that the rest of the system is based on. In the I Ching, it's 8 trigrams. In Tarot, it's the alchemical or Aristotelian 4 elements. Those familiar with Taoism might try to draw parallels between the Western 4 elements with maybe the Wuxing, the 5 elements of wood, fire, earth, metal, and water. I don't think that's a congruent parallel to make for reasons I get into in my book, The Tao of Craft. For the purpose of this presentation, let's talk about what is congruent, comparing the Western 4 elements with the Eastern 8 trigrams of the Bagua. 4 of the 8 fundamental building blocks, or fixed elements, are yang, active, and 4 are yin, passive, which align quite perfectly with the active and passive characterizations of fire, water, air, and earth, the fundamental building blocks of the Tarot system. So these fundamental building blocks are built with numerology. In Tarot, you have the pip cards and the 22 majors. In the I Ching, you have the Luoshu magic square, and superimposed over correspondences with astrology, the 4 seasons, the 4 directions, and so on. The combinations build to form a sophisticated set of multiplicities that represent the universe as we know it. In the I Ching, the system contains 64 points of energy. In the Tarot, the system contains 78. In the Tarot, these 78 points, like the I Ching structure, are subdivided into 2 sequences, the major arcana and the minor arcana. This incredible architecture of a system, like the I Ching, can be used to express philosophy, for divination, for spirit communication, and for magic. The body of law that governs the I Ching is the same body of law that governs the Tarot, whether you want to call it the Tao, the God principle, the Akashic records, or the collective unconscious. These various uses of the I Ching and of the Tarot are functions we are authorized to determine by our will, and through our mind we control the mechanics. By will and by the power of our minds, we can generate any manifestation from the universe we want through our physiology and tap into any point in space-time. Big, bold, declaratory words I've just uttered, am I right? I know. Well, that's exactly what this lecture is about, the function and mechanics to generate extraordinary manifestations in your universe. Let's begin with function. Finally, we're at the heart of what this lecture is about. The first use we will address is tarot for tapping into intuitive creativity, perhaps the most mundane of the 5 pillars of uses we'll be talking about. This is essentially the full value proposition of my first book, Holistic Tarot, and applying the concept of tarot analytics. We're using tarot to trigger important insights that we're not able to retrieve elsewhere. The second use is divination, and within the scope of this lecture, and for the purposes of deconstructing the uses of tarot and craft, I'm going to give a set definition for divination. Here we'll be talking about connecting to an intelligent, universal core life force for prophecy and revelations. Third, we'll talk about how tarot can be a tool for amplifying innate psychic ability, but can also be used to train and further develop psychic ability. Here, when I say celestial contacts, I'm going to be talking about how to use tarot to establish resonance between the physical world and its metaphysical forces of influence. I'll define deity, talk about invocations, and communion of body and spirit. Finally, we're going to lump quite a few different operations under one umbrella term here, this fifth pillar, which I've labeled mediumship and summoning. Here we'll address how to use tarot to contact the dead, underworld or netherworlds, other universes, and just barely skate the surface of a conversation on tarot and demonology. Before concluding, we'll also talk about using tarot in magic, or how to use tarot cards to control life forces. Recall earlier from the Imperial Chinese text Huangdi Yingfu Jing, or the Yellow Emperor's Classics of the Hidden Talisman, that any manifestation of the universe can be generated by you, the practitioner, through your hand if you exercise your will to set the function and your mind to set the mechanics. Let's talk about the mechanics. We're going to start with tarot for intuitive creativity. I did a full hour webinar hosted by North Atlantic Books on this very topic, so if this interests you, be sure to check it out. You can find a free recording of it on YouTube. Just run a search for Benebell Wen's Triggering Creativity with Tarot webinar, uploaded by the user North Atlantic Books. Intuitive creativity is essentially a transcendent experience that happens which goes beyond conventional thought processes, and as a result of that transcendent experience, you're able to interact with your world and express your world at a higher capacity, not available during ordinary consciousness. It's about using tarot to tap into that area below the conscious level, to reach into the archives of your subconscious, and is just at the surface of your personal unconscious. It's that spontaneous spark of insight that enables us to be genius. Often it's hard to control. The spark comes when it comes. However, we can learn to use tarot to generate that spark at will. That's what using tarot for intuitive creativity is about. So, what are the mechanics of operating tarot for triggering intuitive creativity? You begin with the same basic two-step process that any scientist would begin with: observation and analysis. You observe the imagery on the cards, and then you analyze that imagery. Assume that the imagery on the cards express a metaphor for what's going on in your life. Connect the dots. Explain the metaphor. To do so, you'll need to recognize patterns in the cards and also recall knowledge from memory. And by that, I don't just mean recall knowledge of the textbook meaning for each card, but also your experiential knowledge. What other facets of your cultural, historical, and social knowledge are triggered by the imagery on, say, the Ace of Cups or Judgment card? By using the metaphor of the card imagery to look at your situation through a new perspective, a different angle, and to trigger a transcendent experience by the signs, symbols, and patterns you observe in the tarot, you achieve intuitive creativity. You achieve that unconscious burst of inspiration that can then set accomplishment into motion. What would reading tarot squarely through the approach of intuitive creativity look like? The function we've defined for ourselves here is to trigger the genesis of a transcendent experience, which is that intuitive creativity, to help us cultivate measurable progress in our lives. The mechanics we've set will be through observation and analysis, recall of knowledge, recognition of patterns, and to treat the narrative of the cards as a metaphor for some aspect of our lives, and our mission is to identify that aspect. Let's use a sample question for the reading. How can I achieve physical and emotional prosperity in 2017? Assume this is a reading I'm doing for myself. My purpose for this reading is to formulate a concrete action plan to actualize physical and emotional prosperity in 2017. So I craft a 3-card spread, and by my will or intention and my mind, I will manifest the answer in 3 subparts. First, the path to physical prosperity. Second, the path to emotional prosperity. And the third, some insight into the most critical personal act for me to finally ensure that I attain prosperity. Let's say these are the 3 cards that I drew: the Ace of Swords, Knight of Swords, and 10 of Pentacles. First, I observe and analyze. I observe the directionality of the Knight of Swords and his horse galloping leftward, and I analyze that to indicate the past or something I've done before already that continues into the present and future. If this is a reading for myself, that makes sense. If I say the Ace of Swords is a new writing project and the Knight of Swords paired with it about wordsmithing because I've previously been published, I'm continuing an endeavor I've been successful at before and advancing it onward into the future. Second, command recall of knowledge. Remember, this is knowledge of what the cards mean, but also personal experiential knowledge. In fact, personal experiential knowledge is going to dictate what the cards mean to you. For example, you might read an undertone of patriarchy in the Ten of Pentacles. Whether that patriarchy delineated in the card's imagery implies something positive or something negative will depend on your cultural experiences, family experiences, maybe the gender you identify as, or the society that you're a part of. As a practitioner, whether the Ace of Swords means victory, a new conquest, scientific innovation, or decision-making is going to depend subjectively on your personal experiential knowledge, and that's the way it should be. So the card interpretations you see outlined there in the right block of the slide only represents my notes and impressions when I observe and analyze these cards. Back to the point of observation and analysis, or pattern spotting. To pattern spot, bring in as many modes of knowledge as you can. Here, we're applying numerology, astrology, Judeo-Christian mysticism, and other forms of symbolism to identify patterns. If I read the cards left to right, we begin with 1 in the Ace and 10 in the Ten of Pentacles, 1 to 10, from beginning to end. The 10 Pentacles are arranged in the outline of the Kabbalistic Tree of Life, which calls to mind ex nihilo, or creation from nothing. Read in conjunction with the Ace of Swords, symbolizing the sword of the Spirit, or per Judeo-Christian symbology, the Word of God, there is this sense of using words to create something out of nothing. If you bring in the recall of basic knowledge in earth science, you can study the cirrus clouds in the background of the Knight of Swords. Cirrus clouds occur at high altitudes and form ice crystals. Does that mean something symbolically to you? What is it a metaphor of? It could suggest one who is predominantly cerebral. Based on the imagery, the wind blows left to right, so something from the past continues onward into the future, even though the knight himself faces and gallops against the direction of the wind. And when we consider astrological correspondences, the Ten of Pentacles, the only card not like the others by element, is associated with an air planet, Mercury, or the decan ruler Mercury in Virgo. This is an empowered decade for literary and research-intensive endeavors. So this process of observation and analysis, fueled by recall of knowledge, drives tarot reading for intuitive creativity. The purpose here is to get an action plan from the tarot to know what to do and how to do it. Now let's talk about tarot for divination. For the purposes of this lecture, I'm going to give a narrow and specific definition for the word divination. Using tarot for divination is about connecting to a spiritual or religious core, a core that we believe possesses a gravity that keeps all particles in their order, and by that connection, receive an important revelation. By important, I simply mean something of significance to the seeker. I'm going to go with an expression of that spiritual or religious core from Paul Foster Case, a prominent early 20th century occultist who has written seminal works on esoteric tarot and referred to that core as the cause of causes, or the universal intelligent life energy. True divination, Case wrote in Oracle of the Tarot, rests upon the occult truth that the causes of all events in human life are really internal, proceeding from the cause of causes, the universal intelligent life energy or life power. He's drawing a parallel between inner alchemy and outer alchemy, as above, so below, as within, so without. When we use tarot with the intent of divination, we're facilitating a personal communion with that universal intelligent life energy. To do so, we're interacting at a higher vibrational frequency, greater than the ordinary personal vibration, which is what prompts that transcendent experience. In terms of attitude and intent, the practitioner isn't coming into the reading with a self-conscious operation of connecting the dots, as we did with intuitive creativity. Here, there's still observation and analysis, but it operates at a deeper level. It's about receiving information, not finding information. It's about acknowledging a higher connectivity, a collective unconscious, a singular united God principle, something pantheistic, perhaps the Akashic records. Tarot for divination is about receiving a revelation, and the information you receive is triggered by resonance, not by recall of experiential knowledge. I know it sounds like I'm splitting hairs here, but from the practitioner's vantage point, the feeling is going to be very different. It's not so much an operation of patternicity as it will be about seeing omens. And it's all through using tarot to bring about that transcendent experience needed to raise consciousness. Rather than receiving a burst of insight, it's about receiving a burst of solidarity with the universe, with that God principle, that universal intelligent life energy that Paul Foster Case was talking about. The intent for using tarot for prompting intuitive creativity is to gain insight. The intent for using tarot for divination is to receive a prophecy. To receive that prophecy or revelation, you first need to connect to that cause of causes, the Tao, or access the Akashic records, whatever mode of vocabulary you use to articulate that universal life force. Paul Foster Case talked about going within, deep within. It's going to be about reaching far below normal operative levels of consciousness into the unconscious, and where the personal unconscious connects to that collective unconscious. Now, to intend tarot for divination, consider how you design a tarot spread. Here we are using a 3-card spread again for simplicity's sake, and using the same 3 cards so we have an easy point of reference for comparing the various approaches. For divination, we're going to be looking at each card as an omen. Here, there's also that implication of prophecy, and so there's a sense of prognosticating or projecting into future events. Let's say I'm using tarot for divination. I draw those 3 cards for omens to receive the revelation. Instead of tapping into recallable knowledge on a conscious level, I want to look at the imagery as an omen. The Ace of Swords, for example, is a prophecy for something. A prophecy for what? The sword with the laurel wreath and crown. What is that an omen of? What is the mental download I am receiving? Is it an omen for success or an omen for failure? When I look to the Knight of Swords, again, I will it to be an omen, presuming the 78 cards of tarot is an effigy of the Akashic records. Which section of that compendium does the Knight of Swords represent? The mechanics through which my mind operates when I'm using tarot for divination is going to be different from the mechanics through which my mind operates when using tarot for intuitive creativity. Now that we've addressed 2 of the 5 pillar approaches we're going to cover, you might wonder what the point of distinction is if, for both approaches, the end result in terms of card interpretation for me was similar in meaning for both intuitive creativity and divination. Think of it as different paths that you take from point A to point B. Sure, for all practical purposes, you only need to know one way, right? But if you learn the many different paths between the points of departure and destination, you come to a comprehensive understanding of the lay of the land, and much more of this universe becomes illuminated to you. The more you know, the more power you can wield. Tarot for psychic development. Now, I believe psychic ability is physiological, meaning it is like a muscle with an innate capacity that you are born with. Some are born physically stronger than others. Some are born more musically gifted, and a few among us are evolutionary anomalies born more attuned to their psychic abilities. Yet, just like muscles, no matter how weak you might think you are right now, you can get yourself to the gym, work out, and substantially improve your physical strength. Psychic ability can also be strengthened, and you can do so with a tarot deck. Tarot as a tool both amplifies innate psychic ability, what you have as it stands, but with the tarot, like a treadmill or dumbbells, you can also use the cards to build on your physiology and improve your four clairs. I'm defining psychic ability through the four clairs. Clairaudience is to hear sound wave frequencies not otherwise physically perceptible by the human ear. Claircognizance is to have knowledge of a fact before it has become a fact. It's the concept of spontaneous knowledge. Clairsentience is to automatically feel what another is feeling. This is what we refer to a lot of times as being an empath or having empathy. It's to experience what another has experienced. Clairvoyance is to visualize and see a point in the space-time continuum beyond the present physical line of sight. We are still working with more or less the same inquiry for ease of comparison, but when using tarot to tap into psychic ability, notice how I've changed the phrasing of the question. What can you tell me about my physical and emotional prosperity in 2017? When tarot is being used for intuitive creativity, it's about self-empowerment. So we want to know how. How can I? With divination, we're asking a higher power for the answer for a revelation. So the phrasing keyed to that intention would be, will I? Psychic ability is about spontaneous knowledge. So here we're asking, what can be known about? What can you tell me? Likewise, how we program the 3 card positions for our 3 card spread will also be modified according to our will and intention. Now, each card becomes a prompt for these psychic muscles to be exercised. The mechanics here is to hear beyond physical hearing, to see beyond physical seeing, to feel beyond physical feeling, and to think on a plane that exceeds logic or reason. Let's say you pull the same 3 cards we pulled when discussing the other uses, the Ace of Swords, the Knight of Swords, and the Ten of Pentacles. The cards aren't visible on the presentation slide at the moment because I want to break it down and look at the cards one by one as we go through the 4 clairs of psychic ability. So in psychic readings, what would be your mechanics? Break it down into the 4 clairs. Begin with claircognizance, without thinking, allowing no time for logic or analysis to set in. What is that immediate spontaneous hit that comes into mind when you see the card? Ace of Swords, a golden crown laced with laurel leaves, capping a long sword, gray, cloud, dark hills in the distance. Don't go into your knowledge archive. Instead, feel your 3rd eye chakra buzzing, that area just between your 2 brows, and feeling the information coming from there. What spontaneous conceptions come to you? A fight. There is going to be a fight. Are you ready for it? Just blurt things out like that. That's how you exercise your claircognizance. Yes, it may feel awkward and forced at first, but the more you practice, the more natural it's going to feel when you tap into your own claircognizance. We're going to practice clairvoyance exercises with the center card, the Knight of Swords. You draw that card, and there's a knight with his sword raised, charging with great force against the direction of the winds. Now, close your eyes. Using that Knight of Swords as a prompt, now look at that space between your brows, activating your 3rd eye, visualizing that 3rd eye blinking open. What do you see? Maybe you see a woman, arms loaded with files and folders, rushing through the streets of a bustling city, and the direction she scurries in is against foot traffic, the same way the knight in the card rushes against the direction of the wind. As that woman scurries through the streets, she's bumping into people left and right, her focus only on the files and folders in her arms. Open your eyes. How does that scene line up with emotional prosperity? Could someone, that woman, be too mired down in the mundane, too frenetic to catch emotional prosperity when it comes into her life? That's how you read tarot clairvoyantly. To exercise clairaudience, again, activate the 3rd eye chakra and then hear the sounds from the imagery depicted on the card. Staying fixed on those sounds, shift your perspective to real life, to the real world that the seeker dwells in, and search that world for the same sounds. Find those sounds, zoom over to that scene, and then observe. If you're being prompted by the Ten of Pentacles, perhaps you hear small children, babies gurgling and playing among pets. That could be a psychic hit you're getting through clairaudience. Clairsentience is, for all intents and purposes, empathy. Scanning the landscape of the card spread, what emotions from your chest area bubble outward until you feel them just beneath your skin? Often those who are clairsentient are going to feel their heart chakras working in tandem with the third eye chakra during psychic readings. We're breaking down and deconstructing the mental operations that go on when you're using psychic ability in tarot. In real time, it would be seamless, fluid, organic, and often several of the clairs happening at the same time. So think of this discussion as covering psychic tarot readings in slow motion, very, very slow motion. For example, the first card in the spread, the Ace of Swords, the slow motion procedure would be first trigger a spontaneous knowing. What immediately combusts from your third eye chakra prompted by that card? What is the immediate knowing? That's tapping into your claircognizance. Now, what do you see through your mind's eye or your third eye? What do you hear? What sound waves can you perceive that the physical ear cannot hear? Now, from the card imagery and symbolism, what do you feel? Tap into your emotional plane and connect your third eye chakra with your heart chakra. The same step-by-step procedure going through each of the four clairs, like a flow chart, is performed on the second card, the Knight of Swords. Then with the Ten of Pentacles. Then again, the four-step operation to tap into the four clairs is run on the entire card spread cohesively, scanning the full landscape formed by the cards for psychic hits. Again, in real time, tapping into the four clairs would be one swift motion by the practitioner, like the swing of a ground stroke to return a ball in tennis. What we're doing here is isolating each baby step of what a perfect ground stroke in tennis would look like, and in this case, each baby step of what a psychic tarot reading would look like. So when the intent is to use tarot for a psychic reading, what does that one swift ground stroke look like? We just showed you all of the isolated steps. In a real-time reading, you ask that question presented, you shuffle, cut, draw the cards into the three card spread with those intended card meaning positions, and then you tap into your activated third eye chakra. Well, I see that a book you've written scales up the bestseller lists, beating out your competition. Much of your sense of fulfillment and joy this coming year stems from your literary accomplishments and also becoming a more public figure, really stepping both feet now into the public forum where finally your opinions and viewpoints are being heard and valued. But when you're asking about emotional prosperity, I think that in general, this is hard for you. You don't know how to relax. You don't know how to be happy with your status quo. In terms of where you're at now and what you're headed for in the future, I see breaking down patriarchal norms. Also, if it's truly prosperity you're after, that's a mindset, not a condition. And we see fulfillment for you specifically coming from family. The greatest joys of all are going to come from your family life. Reading the presentation slides through each of the covered tarot uses, you might be wondering what the point of deconstructing these various uses is if the essential interpretation of the three cards is the same whether I use tarot for triggering intuitive creativity or for divination or for tapping into psychic ability. Mastery of the various intentions and mechanics that your mind is capable of strengthens the power of your mind. The more powerful your mind, the more incredible the manifestations you can conjure from the universe. Remember, all manifestations in the universe can be generated by the practitioner's physical body, particularly through your hand. The function is determined by your will, the mechanics is determined by your mind. True mastery of tarot, when tarot far exceeds technique and enters the realm of high art, is when you become proficient with all 5 pillars of uses in craft. And these 5 pillars are used interactively, interchangeably, and seamlessly. When a tarot reading session with you will naturally and organically be a blend of these pillars. The next 2 uses of tarot for craft may be controversial, meaning how I express these uses will for sure be subject to much dissent, objection, and differing points of view. So bear in mind that the best I can do here in this presentation is offer to you my subjective reality, my experience, my knowledge, and to impart onto you what I have learned for myself, what I hold to be true and evident, but within the construct of my own reality. For the practitioner, tarot can be used to commune with deity. My way of distinguishing this from tarot for divination is that in divination, I'm accessing this universal force, a monotheistic expression of God perhaps, or the Tao, the Akashic records, or the collective unconscious. It's the cause of causes, the universal intelligent life energy or life power, as Paul Foster Case put it. In contrast, when I say tarot for celestial contacts, I'm talking about deity or deities in a polytheistic sense. So within the scope of this presentation, how I define deity is not necessarily as this literal God dwelling in some heavenly kingdom. For me, it's more figurative. Deity designates the metaphysical or unseen force that affects or can affect a physical or visible force. Let me give you an example. The mythology of Demeter, the Greek goddess of harvest, explains why we have seasons. Her daughter Persephone is forced to dwell in the underworld with Hades for half the year, so when she is apart from her beloved daughter, the goddess Demeter mourns for her loss, and only when Persephone returns to her does she again rejoice and thus bring vitality back to the agriculture on earth. Before science could explain the seasons, the narrative of the goddess Demeter explained it. Today, we know that seasons are the result of the Earth's tilted axis orbiting around the Sun, causing changes in the Sun's influence on the surface of the Earth. Does this mean we no longer need Demeter? To the contrary, the goddess Demeter represents the metaphysical component to the physical component of the axis tilt in the orbitable period. When we contact Demeter, we are contacting that metaphysical component of the seasons, of harvest, the metaphor, which symbolizes how we make do when there is death or omission in our lives. When we can tap into that metaphysical component, we experience transcendence beyond the physical. In esoteric Taoism, we have a dualist principle and two separate pantheons of deities. One governs inner alchemy, where it is believed that certain gods, emperors, or lords dwell within your body and govern the inner workings of both your body and spirit. These gods are aligned with the chakra system, and so deity is the religious expression of the energies represented by the chakras. The other pantheon governs outer alchemy, where gods and celestial spirits exist in the world around us and in a heavenly kingdom above us, akin to the Greek goddess Demeter we covered earlier. So, for instance, the four directional guardians you'd call per Taoist traditions when setting sacred space or doing magic would be Beidi for the north, Zurong for the south, Dongwanggong for the east, and Shiwangmu for the west. These four deities are from the pantheon of outer alchemy. They represent the metaphysical force behind the physical condition of the four compass directions. And so when you set sacred space, meaning that you are establishing a nexus between the physical and metaphysical worlds so that you can enter the metaphysical, you do so by calling upon the metaphysical energies concomitant with the physical. So Beidi for setting the north boundary of your sacred space, Shiwangmu for setting the western boundary, and so on. Whether you're accessing a pantheon of inner alchemy or inner contact gods, or you're accessing a pantheon of outer alchemy, the outer celestial contacts, this notion of crossing over from the physical into the metaphysical means having to raise your own ordinary vibrational frequency to one resonant with a higher vibrational frequency. In other words, you need to raise your consciousness. This often involves more ritualized mechanics to tarot. It generally involves the setting of sacred space, linking different realms together, and then in your mind, by intent, willing yourself to cross over in effect and make contact or establish communion. All of this is done through a transcendent experience that the tarot provides. So let's say our purpose for a tarot reading is to make contact with a particular deity, one we've named and have in mind, and seek to retrieve insight from that deity. Or maybe we want to get a sense of which deity oversees or what is the metaphysical force most prevalent in our current situation. Back to the heart of our sample inquiry about physical and emotional prosperity. Here I am covering two different approaches when I say celestial contact. One, you identify a deity you seek to make contact with, and the tarot reading is presumed to be the message from the deity to you. Two, you want to identify the deities that are most influential over certain areas of your life so that you can then personally access those deities for further assistance in those areas of your life. For either sub-approach, we'll program our 3-card tarot spread with the noted card position meanings: unseen forces affecting physical prosperity, unseen forces affecting emotional prosperity, and how to change the metaphysical to create change in the physical. The mechanics of celestial contact with tarot in simplest form is as follows. Ritual: to set sacred space to raise consciousness, then establishing a cord to connect the physical with the metaphysical, and then creating the nexus. Finally, stepping through that nexus by the power of your intent to access the metaphysical dimension that's running parallel to the physical. Let's talk about the mechanics of using tarot for celestial contacts. When I say ritual and setting sacred space, I don't mean that it requires an elaborate ceremonial process with bells and whistles and 10,000 lit candles. So what might ritual look like? Well, it can be as simple as setting out effigies for the basic elements, in even simpler terms, 4 gemstones corresponding with fire, water, air, and earth. Perhaps a 5th is needed, one for spirit. Your mind intends a set boundary around you and your reading space to be marked into an enclosure, the nexus, and for some, an invocation is recited, such as the famous, I invoke thee, IAO, that thou wilt send HRU, the great angel that is set over the operations of this secret wisdom, and so on and so on. Or perhaps it's a quiet prayer to call upon the 4 guardian spirits of the 4 directions. In the esoteric Taoist pantheon, it might be the 4 guardians I referenced earlier for north, south, east, and west. In I Ching divination, when a practitioner is about to proceed with celestial contact, an invocation is recited naming the gods to be contacted or naming the practitioner's patron deities. But setting the nexus is not enough. There must be an act or an intent of the mind for there to be a connection. Across mystery traditions and institutionalized religions across the world, from all walks of civilization, you'll find common approaches to connecting us, the human world, to God or the celestial world. The most common are by sacred fire, the smoke of incense, consecrated water or holy water, and a 4th, which I haven't listed there on the presentation slide, but is by blood. The point here is to tether the cord, to step beyond the physical realm and into the metaphysical, which is how you raise your consciousness and have your vibrational frequency meet that of deities. Then the tarot reading can proceed. Activate your tarot deck for celestial contacts to occur during the reading. A simple yet effective ritual is to keep stones that have been previously charged and programmed per the 4 directions. For instance, here I have a red jasper stone corresponding with fire, consecrated and charged by the powers of the directional guardian for the south. The fluorite corresponding with water is consecrated and charged by the powers of the directional guardian for the north, and so on and so on. Prior to commencing the reading, I set each stone intentionally into the corresponding directionality and whisper to myself an invocation that calls upon that directionality. The center crystal quartz is a personal stone that amplifies my intuitive abilities during a reading, and after invoking the 4 guardians to protect the space around me, I set the quartz to the center, and it symbolizes the intent of an enclosed area of protection. The center crystal quartz is also what for me invokes deity. Perhaps I might recite a mantra as I set down the quartz. A selenite wand is also another great thing to have. It's a wonderful air purifier for metaphysical purposes. Scanning the entire reading area once over with a selenite wand can establish that nexus and transform your reading area into a sacred space. Then light a single candle or incense to tether the cord. Now, if neither is available at the time, I simply touch my third eye chakra with a fingertip from my dominant hand, then touch my crown chakra and envision both opening, connecting, and a bright white beam of light emitted from the top of my head upward into the heavens to connect with source energy. The whole process of it is provided in greater detail in your workbook. Back to the 3-card reading, drawing the Ace of Swords, the Knight of Swords, and the 10 of Pentacles. If the question is about the unseen forces at play with regard to physical prosperity, noted there by the Ace of Swords, then perhaps we read the card here to indicate the metaphysical force of combat at play. Metaphysical energy will cause a new social political direction in the seeker's life path that affects physical prosperity. Now, what if we're looking to make contact with the deity or metaphysical force that is overseeing the seeker's physical prosperity in 2017? The card drawn here to designate that is the Ace of Swords. You, the tarot practitioner, then examine the card through the vocabulary of deity. Perhaps in the pantheon you subscribe to, this energy of the Ace of Swords calls to mind Zhou Tian Xuanyi, or Lady of the Ninth Heaven. Next, you look at the Knight of Swords. In your transcendent state as a practitioner, you feel resonance with Guan Yu. And perhaps for the 10 of Pentacles, you associate that with the kitchen god. When using tarot for celestial contacts, your primary purpose is to diagnose the metaphysical energies at play in a given situation that persists in your physical world. For the human mind, oftentimes it's easiest to understand that metaphysical energy through mythology, through the vocabulary of gods and goddesses. While the interpretation of the tarot reading for the 3-card spread of Ace, Knight, and 10 is congruent from the exercise of tarot for intuitive creativity, to divination, to using it in psychic reading, to here for celestial contacts, what changes is the practitioner's will and the operations within the mind. This presentation breaks down the different forms and mechanics so that you can master accessibility to all approaches, divination to psychic to otherworldly contact, so that all of the approaches are available to you when you're in a real-time tarot reading. Finally, I admit this final use to tarot I'll be addressing is going to be the most disorganized portion of my lecture. I really struggled with how to articulate all of this and present the material, so please bear with my efforts. First, netherworld. I think with a word like that, we need a definition. By netherworld, I really just mean not of this physical earth, not sentient beings. The first prong of this discussion is on using tarot for mediumship, and by that I mean communication with the spirits of humans or animals who once lived but have now passed on. Here, I'll use Chinese Taoist cosmological theory for context. In esoteric Taoism, there is this belief in soul dualism, where after a sentient being dies, the soul is in fact a binary in the way the physical body was a binary. There is your physical waking consciousness, and then there was your astral body. So astral projection in that sort of practice was about working with your astral body. Like your dual consciousness of body, physical and astral, you have dual souls, the Hun and the Po. After you die, the Hun leaves to go on to its next life incarnation, or to heaven, or to an underworld, or wherever it's to go based on your karma. The Po is the terrestrial soul, what remains behind and lingers on earth, becoming part of this pantheistic earth spirit. It becomes part of Gaia. Think of how the physical remains of your body, whether it's ashes or bone, becomes part of the physical earth, the dirt. Likewise, the Po is the spirit that remains of your soul, and that becomes part of the metaphysical component of earth, like I said, the spirit of Gaia. So mediumship is communication with the Po. That's why space-time doesn't matter under this theory. Per this theory, you could communicate with someone who lived and died 5 centuries ago or someone who died 5 days ago. However, the former seems to be more difficult than the latter logistically for most mediums, but that's more a matter of personal ability, mentality, and once again, back to the concept of what your willpower and mind are capable of manifesting. The tarot can also be used to facilitate stronger connections with you as a channel. Channeling at its simplest definition is when another consciousness occupies your own, so that when you communicate and when you comport yourself during this channeled experience, you are not doing so as yourself, but as that other consciousness. It often presumes the belief in other universes or multiverses. This has long been a concept embedded into esoteric Buddhism and Taoism, where parallel or other galaxies exist alongside our own, and through our minds we are able to connect to those other galaxies because, after all, the Tao connects us all. This includes the belief in a world within our Earth, the hollow Earth theory, or Shambhala per Tibetan Buddhism. In Western mysticism, it's called Agartha. You'll see a variety of concepts from both Eastern and Western mystic thought that harken back to this core idea of other galaxies. We also talk about summonings. Again, I'm using the term broadly and loosely here to cover quite a bit of ground. Summoning is premised on the belief in descended realms, or worlds occupying lower vibrational frequencies than earthly beings. However, this includes souls of those who were once human, who as a result of karma are reborn into one of these descended realms to atone for what they had done. Less innocuous are hungry ghosts, those who have emotionally traumatizing unfinished business left on Earth, whose soul continues to suffer, and out of that pain they plague the living. For the purposes of this course, I'm going to stay quite superficial and barely skate the surface of demonology. I'm literally going to just point out the idea that the tarot can be used in demonology, and then we'll move right along. If the mindset for celestial contacts is one of submission and humility, the mindset for netherworld summoning is that of command and authority. Think of the yin and yang binary. When we talk about celestial contacts, you are the yin and the contact is the yang. In summoning, you are the yang and the contact is the yin. Understanding that theory helps you to craft more effective mechanics for such contacts. Tarot becomes the common language through which the worlds communicate. Again, as with the other uses of tarot, the cards provide that transcendent experience that facilitates the summoning. Tarot in this use is going to be more ritualized than, say, using tarot for intuitive creativity. Here, for sure, we are operating at the outer limits of human psychic and physiological ability. So once again, designing a 3-card spread for ourselves and staying to the same topic of the sample question, physical and emotional prosperity, let's use the hypothetical of seeking to connect with a dead grandfather. We presume the spirit of our grandfather can see a whole lot more of space-time than we can from our physical bodies. So we'd like to call out to Grandpa for advice, and to do so, we use the tarot because the tarot is a metaphysical amplifier. It amplifies our connectivity. It boosts the signal, so to speak. It makes it easier for most of us to operate at extraordinary levels of consciousness. And by extraordinary, I simply mean beyond ordinary. As with any spirit contact, it helps it within your mindset. You are ritualizing the experience. Ritual is what alters your level of consciousness. Also, universal from Eastern mystery traditions to Western mystery traditions is this warning to implement clear boundaries enforceable in both physical and metaphysical realms. I find that if you're not trying to do anything too advanced, basic grounding and shielding will suffice. In your course materials, I will include handouts that instruct on both techniques as I would exercise them. Now, back to the 3-card reading. Since the intent now is to contact Grandpa, we design our 3-card spread accordingly. I'm going to be asking Grandpa for advice and help on achieving physical and emotional prosperity in 2017. Again, this is just for hypothetical purposes to stay consistent with the prosperity inquiry I had started. In actual practice, I'm definitely not going to use tarot in this way. If I'm going through the trouble of reaching out to Grandpa, this is not likely to be the question I'd ask him. So bear with me here. We're just trying to illustrate the mechanics. In such a contact, I might designate 1 card for the message on physical prosperity, a second on emotional, and then the third a prognostication for the year. Okay, so what would a tarot reading that involves summoning forth Grandpa look like? Let's walk through the hypothetical. First, there'd be a ritualized approach to the tarot reading and the setting of boundaries. How this is done varies from tradition to tradition, practitioner to practitioner. There are basic prompts in the workbook to help you get started, however. Here, let's say we set out the 4 metaphysically charged stones, like how we instructed earlier for celestial contacts. Since this is Grandpa we're calling, and this isn't entering the realm of, say, demonology, ritual and boundary setting doesn't need to be quite as elaborate. Nonetheless, as any medium might tell you, frequent spirit contact without proper shielding is kind of like walking through a construction site. You're going to come out the other side with a lot of dust and debris all over you. Rather than wait until afterward to dust yourself off, be proactive and enter shielded. I might then light a white pillar candle, perhaps set out a personal memento that once belonged to my grandfather that connects me to Grandpa. Then I'll shuffle the deck, reciting a call. Just to illustrate by way of an example, I'll use my delineation for the 4 directional guardians. Guardian of the East, Do Wang Gong, if my father is there with you. If my grandfather is there with you, please bring him forth. Guardian of the West, Shi Wang Mu, if my grandfather is there with you, please bring him forth. Guardian of the North, and so on. I'd go through the 4 directions and finally end with Agong. I'd call out my grandfather by name. I then insert your name, call to you now because I need your help. I seek your guidance. Again, I would never do this for this type of question we're using in the example. Such a specific question I would leave up to intuitive creativity or maybe divination. If I'm calling up Grandpa, it's going to be for something a lot more significant than this. Next, I proceed with the tarot reading and use the tarot cards as a language, a mode of communication between Grandpa and me, because the tarot can connect our 2 worlds and the nexus I've created. If I don't have the capability of communicating with Grandpa physiologically, like, what John Edwards, the Long Island medium, Tyler Henry, the Hollywood psychic, or James Van Praagh does, then tarot is an incredibly powerful tool for such communications. Now here, to give you an example of how the same message might come out in a different style based on intention of tarot use, the messages interpreted from the 3 cards, the Ace of Swords, Knight of Swords, and 10 of Pentacles, are put in quotation marks to indicate a form of channeling where the message is not coming from your own consciousness. It's not like in psychic tarot where the messages come from a spontaneous knowing. Here is an overlay of consciousness, and at that point of overlay, you receive the message from this third-party source. In the Grandpa example, we presume these quoted messages are from him to you. He's telling you what he knows based on the broader scope of space-time he has access to that you do not. It's kind of like a game of Marco Polo. I'm the one with blindfolds on, and Grandpa is the one who can see where I'm going, so he's navigating me, telling me what's up. When your intention is to call upon a spirit guide or otherworldly, netherworldly entity for their greater sight and foresight, then you'd use tarot as a tool for netherworld summoning. Although demonology is not covered in the workbook, there is additional contact and practical exercises to help you understand how to use tarot for mediumship, channeling, and other netherworld contacts. We've covered quite a lot of ground in this lecture, beginning at the surface of what the practitioner's mind and physiology is capable of doing, and then going through 5 different uses of the tarot deck that any practitioner of craft is going to want to be proficient at. Are there more than 5? Sure, of course. You could use tarot for meditation, for instance, or astral travel, but the main reason I haven't covered those uses in this lecture is because those aren't ways I personally have used tarot as a tool. Now, there is a sixth use of tarot I'd like to mention to close out our time together. You've probably heard it before, tarot and magic. Tarot cards can be used in spellcrafting. The 78 cards of tarot represent 78 archetypal forces of nature that affect the human condition. If you're a frequent user of your tarot deck, and here I'm for sure inserting my own subjective opinion, the more powerful your deck is at controlling those forces of nature. Yes, I believe that when you first get a tarot deck, it's just pieces of cardstock. It's what your mind can do that activates the power innate within tarot. The more you've worked with that deck, the more empowered the deck becomes. And so when you reach for it in magical workings, it's ready to go because it's been programmed by the power of your will and mind. Specific cards can be chosen out of the deck and used as a talisman to amplify in your life the archetypal force that card represents. Spellcrafting is a lot like cooking. So for instance, if I'm cooking a dish and following a recipe, but I'm missing one of the specific ingredients in that original recipe, I can swap it with something similar that I do have on hand. So that's the same with craft. That ingredient you need is going to be represented in one of the cards in the tarot deck. You can swap in that tarot card for the ingredient to complete your spell. Once again, as with all uses discussed in this lecture, it goes back to the tarot being a catalyst for a transcendent experience to help modify your consciousness. So when the practitioner is using tarot in spellcrafting, the function is to use the tarot card as a magnet of sorts to draw forth, perhaps by law of attraction, the metaphysical energy you're seeking to attract. You can use a particular card to represent the outcome you intend to happen in your life, and then work a spell around that. Taking the example of physical and emotional prosperity, let's say instead of asking about it, you're going to use spellcrafting to make it happen for yourself. And let's say the Ace of Swords, the Knight of Swords, and the Ten of Pentacles represent physical and emotional prosperity to you. You seek to manifest victory, channel a warrior spirit, and acquire prestige. And you believe these are what will bring you physical and emotional prosperity. So you pull out these cards specifically out of your tarot deck and work with them in your spellcrafting. Here's an example. You can intend a card to be an energetic magnet that can attract toward it a particular force of nature you want more of in your life right now. Take that card out of the deck and intend for it to become activated to bring that force of nature into your life. As part of a full moon ritual, set out that card on your altar space, perhaps further supported with items that correspond with that force of nature. In the illustrated example, the Queen of Cups card is activated and placed on the altar during a full moon ritual, and around it are gemstones and artifacts that support the card's purpose, which in this case is perhaps to help a practitioner tap into her softer, more maternal side. The dragon, for those who might not get the reference, is to call upon Longmu, the dragon mother, a Chinese myth of a woman who came upon baby orphan dragons, took them in and raised them as her own children. Then leave that arrangement out on the altar through the moon cycle until the next full moon, or for as long as it is needed. This illustration is an example of how a simple spell a practitioner can cast to use tarot to attract more nurturing qualities and to get more in touch with, for example, here using the Queen of Cups, one's more emotional and creative side. Now let's put it all together. As I had said, in an actual tarot reading, generally you wouldn't sit down with narrow and exclusive intentions, though sometimes you would. For example, sometimes you would want to approach tarot exclusively for divination, or exclusively for mediumship, or in a personal training session to exercise your psychic abilities. So let's talk about what an integrative approach to a tarot reading would look like. A master tarot reader would be open and receptive to whatever comes through during the reading and have honed the personal ability to be receptive to any of the 5 modes we've covered in this lecture. You may want to take notes for the next slide, since I'll be outlining a step-by-step process that best empowers you to bring in all of the approaches. Start your reading by setting sacred space and feeling the entire process ritualized. Invoke divinity. As soon as the cards are set out, note any spontaneous hits you get through claircognizance. Feel your third eye chakra activated. As you feel the activation kick in, note any hits you're getting by way of clairvoyance and clairaudience. Then feel your crown chakra activated, connecting upward, and open yourself up to receive mental downloads or going through the operations of divination. Seek out revelation. Gaze at the card imagery and note which one single symbol or image leaps out at you. That's an omen. What does that sign or symbol represent? Read the omens. Now that you feel quite open at the periphery of your psychic senses, see if you feel the energies of other entities or spirits coming through, whether that's through celestial contacts, the spirits of deceased loved ones, ancestors, spirit guides, ascended masters, entities from other universes or galaxies, or any other spirit energies. Now you may start to feel some of your lower chakras activated. Next, fall into your emotional plane fully, and through clairsentience and empathy, note what you feel. Finally, when you've run through those exercises in your mind and in a reading that would all happen quite swiftly and seamlessly, and if you intuit that there is still more to write out of these cards for the reading at hand, put on your thinking hat and start clarifying the patterns that you see, reaching into your recallable knowledge of the card meanings and also experiential knowledge. What experience has taught you that these cards mean? Deconstruct the metaphor that the card imagery is conveying. Finally, using tarot for magic, draw out the card representing a power that will help you strengthen your weaknesses, compensate for omissions, and craft a spell around that card to manifest the power into your life. Let's end on this note. What is even the point of mastering tarot, or more broadly, mastering craft? Well, let's talk about that tenuous, complicated relationship between fate and free will. If you tend to get pretty good grades in school because you've got a good work ethic and you've always seemed to be better at the sciences than the rest of your class, so you go into organic biology in college and then step by step end up in medical school to become a doctor, did you become a doctor by your own free choice, or were you fated to become a doctor because, say, I don't know, your birth chart bears a midheaven sign Virgo, you've got a bunch of planetary action in the 10th and 6th houses with Hygeia, Uranus, or Neptune populating the 3rd and 6th, all with beautiful trines up to the midheaven? I mean, it feels like free will, right? Because it wasn't your birth chart that kept you burning the midnight oil, studying dense subjects to get A's in final exams. It wasn't destiny that you selected biology when declaring your major. It wasn't fate that took you to the bookstore to buy a stack of MCAT preparatory books, or was it? I'd say it's a little bit of both, the yin and yang that is the relationship of fate and free will. Now, why am I bringing this up? What does this all have to do with tarot or craft? Well, everything actually. The whole point of tarot and craft, or at least the whole point of it for me, is to command a more incisive and clear understanding of how fate and free will play out in a particular life path. Back to that occult text from Chinese Taoism, the Yellow Emperor's Classics of the Hidden Talisman. In it, there's one passage. Before every event, there are opportunities that heaven avails to the practitioner to exercise metaphysical force and transform the path of nature. That last word in the text was hard to translate. Some might say it's nature, some might say it's fate, fortune, or destiny. Also recall earlier this particular law of nature. Particles are kept in order by the gravity of an energetic core. Craft is about the practitioner tapping into that energetic core, altering that gravity in a specific controlled way to alter the order of the particles. Think of it as a form of reprogramming of that tenuous binary, fate and free will. Using tarot for intuitive creativity is to figure out how to be more constructive with your exercise of free will. Using tarot for divination is about illuminating your fate and fortune to you so you can better understand what must be done in terms of free will to make adjustments if necessary. Divination is about seeing that window of opportunity that heaven has availed to us to exercise change, and perhaps the change that is needed must be exerted by metaphysical force or craft. Using tarot in spellcrafting, the last purpose we talked about, is about using tarot to make those changes. Amplifying psychic ability with tarot is about advancing personal knowledge. The more you know, the more power you can exercise. But wisdom never comes bundled with power, so simply the development of power through psychic ability isn't enough. Through celestial contacts, constant communion with our ancestors, and staying connected with other spirit realms, we can attain wisdom. All of it through tarot is toward prompting that transcendent experience.